thanks for joining us for the property team meeting today. Just want to ask you a few questions about where we're at with the market. So we've obviously just had the election. APRA's come out with some news around affordability. What are your thoughts on post-election?
Yeah, look, things are looking very different to where they were even from last week, but certainly from the start of the year. And when we look at where we were at the start of the year, we had the Royal Commission. We were looking at an election, in May, and we had a New South Wales election. There were problems with people getting finance, and fast forward to today, things are vastly different.
Yeah.
So, we've had the election, no changes to negative gearing. The buffer has been removed for people wanting to get home loans. So, now there's been a lot of measures to try and free up access to finance.
Yep.
We're going to potentially have an interest rate cut. And sentiment seems to have shifted. Certainly we're finding it a little bit difficult, a little bit too early to tell on site what's happened to sentiment, but certainly on the ground, people are feeling far more confident about the market than they were 6 months ago or even 5 days ago.
Yeah, okay. And so I guess the question we're getting from a lot of our investors is, do you think we're near the bottom?
Yeah, look, I think we've hit bottom in Sydney. If we have a look at what happened in April, we saw the market flatline, and we hadn't seen that happen since September 2017. So the market was, prices were dropping every single month, and in April it flatlined. We think probably Sydney's at the bottom. Melbourne saw a bit of a decline in April, but I think Melbourne, in terms of say rental demand and even buyer demand, has always been a lot better than Sydney. So we think that's turned around. But you look at the rest of Australia. Perth has done it tough for 5 years now, so Perth is quite different. But if you have a look at smaller cities, Brisbane, Adelaide, Hobart, Canberra, they were all under the same challenges as Sydney and Melbourne, but were flat or growing.
Yeah.
So, they're quite different markets depending where you're looking around Australia.
Yeah. And so one of the, surprises in the election was the first home buyers scheme announcement. I think it took many of us by surprise. What are your reflections on that program? Do you think it's really going to have an impact?
Yeah, because first home buyers are in the box seat at the moment. They've never experienced such great buying conditions. If you have a look, prices have come back.
Yep.
It's great. There's fewer investors in the market. That means they often compete for the same sorts of products, so far less competition. They're 5% deposit. That changes. That's very difficult for a lot of first home buyers to get that initial deposit. So that changes things. The buffer removed on getting a loan. They no longer have to have the servicing requirements, assuming a 7% interest rate. So again, that makes it a little bit easier for them to get finance. And then of course we have all those first home buy grants. So depending on where you are in Australia, they're highly variable and can get quite complicated. But we do know that they're also very effective in getting first home buyers into the market.
Yeah. And so I guess then one of the questions that we had for you was, would you, if you were going to go into the market now, what would you do?
Yeah, so I think now's a good time. If you consider that right now we've seen price declines that have been quite significant, depending where you are, but just say Sydney across the board is now 10% from peak. So prices have come back 10%. There's a lot of stimulus in the market, so there's lots of things to suggest that pricing will at least stabilise, potentially grow. So I think now's a good time to buy. I think in 6 to 12 months' time, I think we will have seen price growth in many parts of Australia. And so if you find your ideal property or find an investment that you're really into, I think it's a good time to negotiate a deal.
Great, excellent. Well, it's good to finally have some positive news on the property front. And thanks for taking the time to come in and see us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.